Welcome to Module 1 in the 2021 Test Security Training Series. OSSE's Office of Assessment has developed a series of training modules to prepare LEA test coordinators for Spring 2021 statewide assessment administration. There are 6 required training modules. These modules are required for all LEA test coordinators, including those responsible for access and alternate access, MSAA, and PARC. The modules follow an order of activities in the assessment coordination timeline. Upon completion of all training modules, LEA test coordinators will need to complete a quiz and certification form, verifying that they have viewed all content. A score of 80% or higher on the quiz will serve as the official attendance and completion of the 2021 Test Security Training Series. In Module 1, we will cover test security policy and the first 4 steps in our assessment coordination timeline. This assessment coordination timeline shows the activities needed in order to complete statewide assessment administration in the District of Columbia. The color and shape of each icon indicates who is performing each task. Each training module provides detailed information on the activities in the assessment coordination timeline. In this module, we will cover the steps highlighted in the orange dotted line. As it is evident in your viewing of this OSSE training module, most, if not all, of these steps have already occurred. If you have not completed these steps in this module, please contact the assessment team as soon as possible to get the assistance that you need. Before we go into the assessment coordination timeline, I want to center our discussion in test integrity and security policy. For those who have attended test security training in previous years, you may recognize this statement from OSSE. It is something that we like to share at the beginning of our trainings, as it's important to remember why we ask for the standardization we do. I'll read the statement. OSSE's goal is to develop and provide statewide assessments that yield fair and accurate results. To do this, schools and local education agencies, LEAs, are to administer assessments to the best of their ability in consistent and standardized conditions. The best way for us to support schools and LEAs in administering quality assessments is to ensure educators understand and recognize acceptable and unacceptable assessment practices. In spring 2021, we will be administering assessments both in person and through remote testing for the first time. This shift in testing location and structure necessitates new policy and administration procedures. Our goal is to provide sufficient guidance to create as consistent conditions as possible while reflecting the real need for flexibility in remote testing. Let's start with an overview of our test security policy documents. In DC, we are bound by a number of laws, regulations, and compliance documents detailing our test security requirements. We will go over each of these pieces of policy individually. Something that's a little different this year is that we will be releasing 2 sets of test security guidelines, one for our access and MSAA assessments, and one for in-person and remote PARC administration. The foundational document that is the root of all of our requirements is the Test Integrity Act of 2013 and its 2 amendments from 2015. The Test Integrity Act of 2013 defines key terms and roles, sets requirements for OSSE, LEA, and schools, and provides prohibitive actions set for all authorized personnel. The 2015 amendments updates requirements for the school test plan submission and approval process, sets requirements for OSSE training and guidance document release, and updates the list of approved electronics during testing in special circumstances. In addition to the guidance presented in the Test Integrity Act as amended, OSCE releases annual policy documents and guidance that further clarifies what's presented in the Act. The first annual piece of guidance is the Test Security Guidelines. Test Security Guidelines are released annually by OSCE to LEAs and the public, stating minimal requirements for maintaining test security procedures. Test Security Guidelines expound on requirements set forth in the Test Integrity Act of 2013 as amended. An example of those ideas are OSCE, LEA, and school roles and responsibilities, specific guidance on test environment and administration, as well as exceptional circumstances that arise due to differences in assessments or health concerns. As a reminder, OSCE will release 2 sets of test security guidelines, one for MSAA and access assessments, and one for in-person and park administration. In the instances where the guidance is different, those differences will be reflected in this training as well. In addition to the test security guidelines that OSCE releases, our test administration vendors also release annual test coordination and administration manuals for LEA and school staff. Assessment manuals are available for all spring 2021 assessments, which include PARC, MSAA, Access, and Alternate Access for ELS 2.0. Remote testing supplements to the PARC test coordinators and test administration manuals are available and provide guidance for the planning and execution of remote administered assessments. As a reminder, the District of Columbia will not administer the DC Science or DLM assessments in 2021. Assessment manuals provide critical instructions for test coordinators, technology coordinators, and test administrators, and procedures and protocols to complete before, during, and after test administration. All of the documents mentioned in this module, as well as other test security documents, can be found on our Test Security and Incident Report webpage. The link is listed here. I found that you can also search OSCE Test Security in most search engines, and it will bring up our webpage as well. Please use this webpage as the first step to inquire about test security information or documentation. We regularly update our page with new documentation and policy throughout the year. In addition to our test security webpage, we have also created a folder with all documents discussed in this training module. You can find that in the link posted here. Now that we have discussed our policy, we can go over the different authorized personnel that will be used during test administration, as well as your role as the LEA test coordinator. There are a number of formal roles established in the Test Integrity Act. Each of these roles have unique responsibilities to ensure test administration is secure and consistent. Specifically, formal assessment roles include the State Education Agency, OSCE, Test Integrity Coordinators, which is also called the LEA Test Coordinator, the Test Monitor, which is also called the School Test Coordinator, the Test Administrator, the Test Proctor, Special Populations Coordinator, and the Technology Coordinator. We will speak about each of the roles mentioned in the previous slide individually in a moment, but first we can talk about the general term of authorized personnel. An authorized personnel is any individual who has access to statewide assessment materials or are directly involved in the administration of a statewide assessment. This means any person who will be involved in testing and all of the folks who we will discuss in the next few slides. These individuals have general requirements as established in the Test Integrity Act. Those include to complete testing integrity training by OSSI or the LEA test coordinator, to receive the test integrity and security notification statement, to report breaches of test security and or integrity, to cooperate in testing integrity and security inquiries or investigations, to refrain from prohibitive actions, and to read all applicable directions and guidance. It is important to note this year that there may be caregivers and family members who will be around during test administration in the remote setting. Please be advised that those folks are not considered authorized personnel and therefore will not be directly involved in administration of the assessment. Another note, if your school is only administering in a remote posture and will not have students in school, please note that any of the authorized personnel discussed here can successfully complete these tasks remotely as well. The first role we will discuss is the role that you all will likely play, which is the Test Integrity Coordinator. In some documentation, you may see the role called the LEA Test Coordinator instead of the Test Integrity Coordinator. Just know that they are the same role. One is the legal term, the Test Integrity Coordinator, while the other is what we use for administration purposes. The Test Integrity Coordinator are individuals designated by the LEA to be responsible for testing integrity and security for the LEA in all schools or campuses under its purview during statewide assessments. The LEA can choose up to 3 different individuals to play this role for their assessment. An example, a larger LEA could have one person as the park coordinator, a different person as the MSAA coordinator, and a third person as the access and alt access coordinator. This is not a requirement, so all of these roles can certainly be the same person, but the opportunity is there for LEAs who choose to separate the roles. As I mentioned in the previous slide, if your LEA or school is not assessing students in person, the LEA test coordinator does not need to be on site to fulfill these duties. In addition to requirements of all authorized personnel, the LEA test coordinator is also required to designate, support, and train test monitors, complete test security and integrity training, submit school test plans for each school or campus under the LEA's purview, to monitor test administration, report any breach of testing security or deviation from the test plan, investigate, document, and report to OSSI any breaches or deviations, and to sign and collect and submit test integrity affidavits. Similarly to the LEA test coordinator, the school test coordinator, or the school test monitor, which is its legal term, is responsible for test integrity and security for a school or campus site. These individuals are assigned this role by the LEA test coordinator. Also, like the LEA coordinator, any school may have up to 3 different people designated in the role by the assessment, one for park, one for MSAA, and one for access or alternate access. As I just mentioned in the previous slide, if your LEA or school is not assessing students in person, the school test coordinator does not need to be on site to fulfill these duties. Specific requirements for the school test coordinator include creating a school test plan. Many LEAs work on the school test plan and submit it directly to OSSI. If you as an LEA test coordinator would like your school coordinator to work on the first draft of the test plan, you're free to do so. Please reach out to shannon.bell@dc.gov so that you can get school coordinators access to our QuickBase application. We will talk more about the school test plan in another module, but I wanted to flag that information here. In addition to potentially creating the school test plan, the school test monitor is also required to conduct test administration training for all authorized personnel, if that's determined by the LEA, to create and disseminate school test plans, to oversee security for all secure materials, to support authorized personnel administering the tests, and to sign and submit to the test integrity coordinator the test security affidavit. The next role to cover is the test administrator. The test administrator is an individual identified by the school test monitor to be responsible for administering the assessment to students. Requirements for the test administrator include to conduct the testing sessions as outlined in the appropriate test administration manuals, to establish a testing climate within a test location, coordinate the distribution and return of test materials to and from students, ensure that students who require accommodations receive the appropriate accommodations in their testing group, and to account for and maintain the security of all test materials in their purview. One change for 2021 is that the teacher of record may serve as a test administrator for their students without the need for an additional proctor present. This change is an acknowledgement that school staffing and student groupings may be impacted by additional health and safety protocols in place within schools. As a reminder, parents and caregivers who have students participating in remote testing are not to serve as test administrators or proctors. School-based staff will serve as remote test administrators for students testing at home. Caregivers may assist students with logging in, but it is expected that test administrators assist students with any assessment-related questions and tasks during testing. Lastly, as I just mentioned in the previous slide, if your LEA or school is not assessing students in person, the test administrator does not need to be on site to fulfill their duties. The test proctor's primary responsibility is to assist the test administrator with test administration and classroom or session management as needed. Unlike other formal roles, the test proctor does not have a specific set of duties, and their duties may vary greatly based on the needs of the administrator and classroom. Although there is no formal list of duties, the test proctor is still required to fulfill all requirements for authorized personnel, including being trained, reporting breaches for security and integrity, and participating in any investigations. This individual does not have to be employed by the school or LEA and can be a volunteer. For those who have attended this training in previous years, OSSI has stated that parents may serve as a role of proctor in a school, but cannot proctor their own students. Please be reminded that this year, parents or caregivers supporting students at home are not considered test administrators or proctors. School-based staff will serve as remote test administrators for students testing at home. Those individuals considered proctors must adhere to all authorized personnel responsibilities. Lastly, as I mentioned in the previous slide, if your LEA or school is not assessing students in person, the test proctor does not need to be on site to fulfill these duties. Throughout this training, you will see test security reminder slides that synthesize important test security reminders for steps in our timeline. Our first test security reminder involves the test proctor role. In previous years, there was a requirement for a test proctor to be present whenever the test administrator is administering an assessment to their students of record. An example would be if an ELA teacher would administer the ELA PARCC assessment to their ELA class. Due to the health and safety concerns this year, OSSI will suspend this requirement. Proctors will not be required to be in the classroom if the test administrator is assessing their students in person. A proctor is also not required if the test administrator is a teacher of record in a remote setting. Additionally, we understand that schools may be experiencing staffing concerns and may be stretched thinner than in previous years. OSSI wants to be clear that having an additional proctor in either in-person or remote setting is completely optional in 2021. Schools may decide what is useful for successful administration while considering health, safety, and staffing concerns. The last two authorized personnel that we will discuss are the Special Populations Coordinator and the Technology Coordinator. The Special Populations Coordinator assists the test monitor in identifying and documenting all testing accommodations needed for students. They also train administrators to administer accommodations and may monitor testing for the correct and secure implementation of accommodations. The Technology Coordinator assists the test monitor in preparing the administrator and student devices for secure testing according to vendor directions in both in-person and remote settings. The Technology Coordinator may also troubleshoot any technology problems that may arise during administration. And for remote testing, LEAs will develop protocols for providing support to students or test administrators who may have technology issues during testing. Lastly, as I mentioned in the previous slide, if your LEA or school is not assessing students in person, the Special Populations Coordinator and the Technology Coordinator do not need to be on site to fulfill these duties. Now we can briefly talk about the assessments and the timelines. Here you will see all of our statewide assessments. We have NAEP, Access and Alternate Access, PARC, MSAA, DC Science, and Dynamic Learning Maps, or DLM. A few reminders for the 2021 administration. The NAEP administration has been postponed for 2022. There will be no NAEP administration this school year. Also, DC Science and DLM will not be administered in spring 2021. Our testing windows are listed in the table you see here. Access for L's testing window starts on February 15th and ends on April 9th. This administration will be in person only. MSAA's testing window runs from March 15th to April 30th. This administration will also be in person only. For PARC, our online testing, both in person or remote, will be April 5th to May 28th. If there are students receiving paper accommodations, which can only be administered in person, the assessment window runs from April 5th to May 21st. The next things we will cover in this module will be 4 pre-planning steps that will likely have already occurred before you're able to view these training modules. If you have not completed any of these steps in the timeline, please reach out to the assessment team as soon as possible so that we can assist you. Throughout all of the training modules, you will see this assessment coordination timeline that will show you which steps will be covered in each module. In Module 1, we will cover all coordination steps between selecting LEA test coordinators and attending test security training. As is evident by the viewing of this module, most, if not all, of these steps will have already occurred. The first step in our timeline is to select LEA test coordinators and submit information to OSSI. The LEA test coordinator is responsible for maintaining test integrity and security for the LEA and all of the schools and campuses under its purview during statewide assessment. We talked about this role and the responsibilities of these individuals in the previous section of this presentation. So please refer back there to refresh your memory on what specific things these individuals are responsible for completing and overseeing. It is very likely that you are viewing, because you are viewing this training, that you have already been selected to play this role for at least one of the assessments at your LEA. As a reminder, there can be up to 3 different folks from your LEA that can play this role: one for the access assessments, one for MSAA, and one for PARC. There does not have to be 3 different individuals. They can be the same person or any combination up to 3. Access for ELS 2.0 and alternate access, MSAA, and PARC LEA test coordinators, names and contact information must be submitted to OSSI each year. That information needs to be shared and updated at the link you see here. We will use the information from this form to assign access to your testing platforms, the school test security plan application, and for other record-keeping purposes. So it's really important that you have updated information in the link provided here. If there are changes to the LEA test coordinators, or you have not entered this information in the form, please do so as soon as possible. The next step in our timeline is to determine your LEA test windows and submit that information to OSSI. In December 2020, OSSI shared the state's test windows for each of our assessments for the 2021 statewide assessment season. Those state windows are also covered in this module in the Assessment and Timeline section. School test windows are essential scheduling tools that serve as a foundation for all assessment planning at your LEA and schools. If there are multiple schools within your LEA, each of these school test windows can be the same or different, so long as they fall within OSSI's test window. The LEA test coordinator, in coordination with the school test coordinator, is responsible for determining school test windows for each of the schools in the LEA. Some things to consider when selecting test windows. LEAs and schools may test students at any point during the state test window for that assessment. In previous years, there was a requirement that PARC could only be administered within a 30-day window within the state PARC window. We are suspending that requirement this year. So long as the school's window is within OSSI's window, students can be assessed at any time. When choosing a test window for the school, it is important to also include makeup testing days. Lastly, a broader window may be helpful in supporting the unique schedules schools may have due to health and safety concerns. Once the LEA test coordinator has selected test windows for each of the schools within its LEA, those windows need to be communicated to OSSI. The best way to communicate those windows is by creating a new school test security plan within our QuickBase application for each assessment. The link to the school test security plan application is linked here. Once you have access to the application and are able to get in, you can go to your homepage and select Create a New Test Plan from your homepage. Once you create that plan, you'll be able to select the assessment you're setting up the plan for and enter the start and end dates, which is the test window for each of your assessments. After you've done that, all you need to do is click Save. You can come back to this test plan and enter in the questions at any point after that. There will be a separate training module that will go over our school test plans and the QuickBase application. You'll be able to access that supplemental module in the same place that you can access these trainings. In that module, we will look at the test security plan application. I'll show you how to submit a plan and how to submit your test windows. The next step in our timeline is to apply for alternate assessments. Eligibility for participation in any alternate assessment for the 2021 school year begins with LEAs completing the appropriate documentation and SEDS. During the Individualized Education Program, the IEP development process, or through an IEP amendment, IEP teams are to carefully review OSSI's participation criteria, to identify individual students for whom it may be most appropriate to participate in alternate assessments. Every fall, OSSE reviews student records to determine eligibility for alternate assessment participation for the current year. The deadline for applying for alternate assessment participation for 2021 was October 16th, 2020. As a reminder, this step would have already been completed in the fall of 2020, with the appeals process wrapping up in December 2020. If you have not completed this process and have any questions, please contact Michael Craig on the assessment team at michael.craig@dc.gov. A test security reminder. All of our statewide assessments, including our alternate assessments, are secure assessments and must adhere to all test integrity and security requirements. The last step that we'll cover in this module is to complete OSSE assessment training. OSSE hosts many trainings to support LEAs and school users with the administration of statewide assessments. To view our complete training schedule, please visit the link listed here. All of OSSE's facilitated assessment trainings are optional except for the test security training modules. Speaking specifically to the test security training modules, there are a few things to keep in mind. All LEA test coordinators must complete all test security modules each year. OSSE follows the train the trainer model for test security training, meaning OSSE will provide training to LEA test coordinators, and then LEA test coordinators must train school test coordinators. Depending on the needs and decisions from the LEA, the school test coordinator may then train all authorized personnel at the school, or the LEA coordinator can choose to train the school test coordinator as well as all other authorized personnel at the school. For test security training, here are the steps that need to occur to ensure everyone who needs to be trained are trained. All of these steps need to be executed by either the LEA or school test coordinator, depending on whether your LEA chooses to have the LEA or the school coordinator train authorized personnel at the school. 1. Complete OSSE test security training. 2. Review test security resources provided by OSSE and assessment vendors. 3. Plan LEA and school level test security and administration training for each assessment your LEA or school will administer. 4. Reach out to OSSE and assessment vendors for questions or clarifications. 5. Schedule training dates with your staff to include those dates in your school test security plan. And 6. Train authorized personnel and make sure to share the test security and integrity notification statement with them prior to test administration. The test security and integrity notification statement can be found at the link here. It can also be found on our webpage and in the Google folder that will be attached to this training module. An additional reminder, this year and any year, trainings can occur either in person or remotely at your LEA or school. A test security reminder. All LEA test coordinators must complete all modules of test security training. School test security plans will not be approved if the LEA test coordinator listed in this plan did not complete test security training and the certification form. At the end of these training modules, you will need to complete a certification form letting OSSE know that you've completed all modules. We will use that certification as proof of attendance of this training. Here are the dates for access-specific trainings. Both of these trainings will be held virtually by a representative from WIDA, the assessment vendor for access. Information on how to register can be found in the January 11th NGA Bulletin. If you have any questions about these trainings, please reach out to Michael Craig on the assessment team at michael.craig@dc.gov. Here are some dates for MSAA specific trainings. The training module will be available on March 2nd and can be found on the MSAA online platform under the modules link. Information on how to register for the March 3rd test administration webinar can be found in the February 16th NGA bulletin. If you have any questions about these trainings, please reach out to Michael Craig on the assessment team at michael.craig@dc.gov. Here are the trainings that we have planned for PARC this year. Additional information, including how you can register and participate, can be found on our Test Coordinator training webpage on AUSSIE's website. This completes Module 1 of this training series. Please move on to Module 2, where we will cover Part 1 of Preparing for Test Administration. If you have any questions about AUSSIE assessment policies or specific assessment programs, please feel free to reach out to the appropriate member of the AUSSIE assessment team. Thank you.